they went to 60th Street and 61st Street here because that's where the line is. And so, yes, like whenever there's a line, it's going to suck for the people who are like, 5 feet from it. And what he's saying is like, in order to go north, I actually have to go south, go 1 block over, and then go north, and boom, now I had to bing through it. The other funny thing, though, is that, okay, it's that is kind of a funny predicament that the guy is in, that just because of where he is, he's going to get dinged every possible time. And you know what? If he has a good alderman or whatever, a good city councilman, everybody in that block, can get half off, whatever. I don't care. What's funny though, they're talking like 18 blocks. It's a 20-minute walk. Like this is not a long distance. And the point of living in a city like Manhattan is that it is walkable, that you can get places by foot, and that's good for you. It's good for the planet. It's good for your kids to do that walk. So that guy is not, for any of the arguments, kind of a sympathetic character there. But I think there are some more sympathetic arguments that we should entertain and see if we can grapple with.
Yeah, let's take a look at this headline. This is from the New York Post. Map shows congestion pricing will cost up to $27 to drive into Manhattan. Firefighters, teachers, and businesses can't afford it. So here's the map, and if you're looking at it, it's similar to the first map that we showed, but it actually gets even more specific about if you're commuting through particular points in New York City. If you're super familiar with New York, it'll make sense to you. Brooklyn Bridge, Manhattan Bridge, Williamsburg Bridge. You can see some of these exact pricing for different folks, toll by plate versus toll by Easy Pass. This is really expensive. This is really expensive. I saw one man on the street interview with a guy who was just a blue collar worker who was commuting into the city, and said it would cost him an extra $200 a month if he didn't start taking the subway. The subway, of course, is not something that a lot of people who aren't using it regularly want to start using right now, because there's fare evasion that leads to some unfortunate experiences with law enforcement. There's also, we just saw last week, that horrifying video of a man who somehow miraculously survived after being pushed onto the platform as a train was coming on by someone who was just doing it for the hell of it, seemingly. The woman who was burned alive as passersby were helpless, and some of them may have been able to do something but didn't. Law enforcement didn't do much at all. Everyone has seen these images, and people are not keen to leave the safety of their vehicles. And I say that, safety, not, being not in terms of car crashes, which are obviously very significant there as well, and everywhere, but putting themselves vulnerable onto the subway is something that a lot of people don't want to do, especially, when it was previously, they had organized their commutes around budgets that were totally doable for them. And now the city is asking them to pay more money when, let me just share this next screen and get your thoughts on this, Ryan. You had Uber and Lyft spending millions of dollars pushing for the congestion pricing because it helps them while it doesn't help other people. I think that's pretty interesting. This is the New York Post saying they poured millions of dollars into efforts to legalize the congestion tolling, and they stand to be among the biggest winners. They hired top lobbyists to help persuade key state and city officials to approve the controversial levy, including Governor Kathy Hochul and the MTA. So that brings this into interesting perspective as well. I'm curious what you make of it, Ryan.
Yeah, so Uber and Lyft lobbying for this and getting a sweetheart deal out of it where it's cheaper for them, and it makes it easier for them to compete. That's BS, and they ought to. That shouldn't be the case. I think the opponents there have a very reasonable argument, because not only are they getting a sweetheart deal, then there's going to be less congestion and they're going to be able to zip around more. Now on the other hand, people who use Ubers and Lyfts, pretty frequently are going to benefit from that because their trips will be quicker. There's a kind of a chicken and egg, problem here that the city is trying to address. To your point about the subway being trash, I lived there about 20 years ago or so, and I used to take the subway to work. And people who live in New York have a real fondness for and defensiveness around its subway and all the character that it has. But it's also, compared to other major cities around the world, particularly around the world, and even in the U.S., it's trash compared to a lot of them, and it should be a lot better. So this is supposed to be the greatest city in the world, and it definitely does not have the greatest subway system, or not even probably in the top 100. And so, in order to upgrade that, they're trying to come up with money through this congestion pricing scheme, and so it's going to push people to use a system that is not yet upgraded. But if you don't do something like this, then it never gets upgraded. And people have both over-congested traffic and a completely degrading subway system. So the low income, there's a low income discount that has been worked into the law, which is just woefully, I think, inadequate. I think it's, if you have a gross income of $60,000 or less, you're able to get half off of your fare, but only after your first 10 trips. And I think the 60,000 is pretty absurd. Most people who are coming into New York, the reason they're driving into New York is because they're making a little bit more than that. Mm-hmm. But it's still extraordinarily difficult to live in New York on, say, 70, or live in the New York area on even 70 or $80,000, especially if then all of your, you're spending hundreds of dollars on tolls and fares. So
the cost of living is extremely high.
They really should have made that discount a lot more generous and make it
middle
easier,
class.
Make it easier for the middle class to get. But if it works, then this is the argument that I would make to people who don't want to pay it but end up paying it because they don't live near transit and it's just not feasible for them to use the transit. Like, look, if you actually shave off a half an hour of your commute each way, and let's say you make $40 an hour, you make $30 an hour. If you shave off an hour of that, that's $30 or $40 that you, not to get too economics bro or neoliberal, but like, people's time is valuable. And so if it works, and that's a huge if. So far we're seeing it working. Like, so far we're seeing that traffic does seem to be moving faster. Let us know in the comments if you live in New York and if you've been driving around the city, what your experience has been. But if you can actually save that time is money. You can actually, you could work an extra hour on your shift if you can get those hours, or you have an extra hour to yourself a day, which, is that worth $9 to you? To a lot of people, I think it would be, especially if that money is then going into improving the subway system in the long run.
The obvious benefit while we're doing the sort of advantages and disadvantages, pros and cons, is also for emergency vehicles is a serious problem in New York. That when traffic's not moving and you need to get ambulances through, that's a significant reason just in and of itself to start thinking about how to deal with congestion. But I just think what sucks, and this is not just New York based, but New York in particular, where the cost of living is really high and people are taxed to hell and have been for years. It's like you're punishing them. You're punishing them for the city's mismanagement of their own taxpayer dollars. And people have organized their lives over the course of years around commutes that work for their budget, that work for their schedule. And so the sudden, it just feels like a punishment for people who have been dutifully paying their taxes for years. And now, because the reason the subway is a disaster, it's not really just because they lack resources. They lack resources, financial resources, because of the mismanagement. It's a complete vicious cycle right now. People have been paying into the system, and it just, again, it's one of those things that just is going to, the middle class is going to bear the brunt of it, which obviously sucks.
Although, meanwhile, Dave Weil pointed out a really fascinating class dynamic in the New York Post coverage of I don't know if you saw this, but the Post was writing about drivers who were cleverly evading the fare. Because people have different tricks. You put this gloss on your license plate, which is illegal, but if you can get away with it, nobody sees it. then